The right elbow is a complex hinge joint which is formed between two or more bones. So in this case, we have the distal end of the humerus and the proximal ends of the radius and the ulna. So movements of the elbow are flexion and extension, as seen here in this model. However, additionally, you can rotate the forearm and wrist by moving the radius around the ulna, which you can also do here. The hinge joint allows movement only in one plane, and it's a uniaxial movement which occur in the sagittal plane. The elbow articulates at the trochlear notch of the ulna and the humerus, as well as the head of the radius and the capitulum of the humerus. Here is a diagram of the elbow joint showcasing the tendons, ligaments, and bones located here. Under these ligaments, we would find the articular cartilage as well as the joint capsule. The humerus has the following landmarks. First, at the proximal medial end, we have the head of the humerus, which articulates with the glenoid fossa of the scapula, forming the glenohumeral joint. Next, we have the greater and lesser tubercles, which are roughened areas where the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and teres minor muscles attach. The shaft is the middle portion, which is another origin point for muscle attachment. The deltoid tuberosity is a raised rough area located on the lateral side of the shaft at its midpoint, and the deltoid muscle attaches here. The lateral and medial epicondyles are rounded projections on the side of the distal end of the humerus. The trochlea is sort of pulley-shaped, and it articulates with the trochlear notch of the ulnar bone at the elbow joint. On the radius, we have the head, which has a concave articulating surface and is enclosed by the annular ligament. Then, we have the radial tuberosity, which is a bony projection for a place of attachment for the biceps muscle. The styloid process serves as attachment for the brachioradialis muscle and the radial collateral ligament. Moving on to the ulna, we have the olecranon, which is another projection forming part of the trochlear notch. The coronoid process is a ridge in the bone also forming this notch, which is wrench-shaped. Ulnar tuberosity is rough and is immediately distal of the coronoid process where the brachialis muscles attach. Here is a diagram showcasing some important landmarks in a 90-degree flexed position at the elbow joint. The lateral epicondyle is attached to muscles involved in extension, which are connected to your nervous system through the radial nerve, which travels on the outside of your elbow. So the medial epicondyle is connected to flexion muscles, which allows you to grasp things, connected to the brain through the median nerve. The elbow, similar to all other synovial joints, consists of articular cartilage and a joint capsule, which encloses the joint and is very fibrous and strong. So you would find the articular cartilage in between the bones, and I represented the joint capsule with this band in the middle, right here, which extends to the radius and the ulna, which you can see underneath. So this is joined to form the collateral ligaments, which are the radial collateral and the ulnar collateral ligaments, and it helps to support them and stabilize the flexion and extension movements of the arm. So synovial fluid is present between the bones to lubricate it, which reduces the friction and the wear. So the synovial membrane secretes this fluid from the bursa, which is the liquid-filled sac. Now we can start to look at the ligaments. So there are 3 ligaments of the elbow. So first you have the radial collateral ligament, you have the annular collateral ligament, and you have the ulnar collateral ligament. So right here you can see the ulnar collateral ligament, and if I turn it around, you can see here we have the annular ligament and the radial collateral ligament with these 2 bands right here. The radial and ulnar ligaments maintain the position of the bones relative to the epicondyles of the humerus. The annular ligament extends around the head of the radius, and this holds the bone together. The ulnar collateral ligament is made up of thick fibrous tissue, which connects the medial epicondyle of the humerus to the coronoid process located on the ulna. The radial collateral ligament is also fibrous, and it extends from the lateral epicondyle and blends in with the annular ligament. As you can see, the annular ligament I put on top. So here we have the interosseous membrane. So what this is just a layer of thick tissue that separates the radius and the ulna from each other. Range of motion at this joint is limited to around 145 degrees of flexion and around 180 degrees of extension. Flexion is inhibited only by the soft tissues which surround the joint. So muscles producing movement at this joint are the biceps brachii, which is right here, the triceps, as well as we have the brachioradials and the brachii. So the triceps act as extensors, which is a long muscle posterior of the humerus. So this muscle can increase the angle between the humerus and the forearm bones. The bicep functions as a flexor at the elbow, and the brachialis act to flex the elbow whether in pronation or supination. As we know, this action is supinated, and this would be pronation. So the brachioradials act to supinate the forearm from its pronated position. So there's actually 3 different types of fractures. You can fracture the olecranon, the distal end of the humerus, or the radial head or neck. So when you have a radial fracture, when you would specifically twist your forearm in this motion, that's when you would feel an intense amount of pain. So olecranon fractures, which usually are displaced, and this would actually require surgery for it to heal. So fractures of the humerus, you can either, just like the radial head or neck fractures, you'd either have to require surgery, or like any other fracture, you can simply be put in a cast or a sling. So at the time of injury, you may hear a pop or a snap, and if you see any visible deformity, this may be a sign that you have in fact fractured your elbow. So I actually did fracture my right elbow, so following I'll provide x-rays of around the 2nd or 3rd time I had to go back in to check my elbow. So at this point, it is probably mostly healed. So my fracture actually was on the distal end of the humerus, and you'll be able to see this following. To construct this model, first what I did was I went to Home Depot and I got 3 different sizes of like a cylindrical pieces of wood. So this one was the largest, then the ulna was the 2nd largest, and the radius was the smallest. So for the hinge, I can move this aside. I actually used a hinge that is supposed to be for doors, and it's a magnet. The purpose of using this magnet door hinge was so that it can flex and extend, but it also can twist just like the forearm does. So after I had assembled the pieces of wood as well as the hinge, which I just screwed on, I used modeling clay to more accurately represent what the bones look like. So as you can see, the epicondyles on the humerus as well as the head of the radius, which is covered by all of the tendons and ligaments. So then for the tendons and ligaments, what I actually used was resistance workout bands. What I did this was, once I cut it, I just screwed it into the clay and the wood, or I used these white, it's kind of like a staple almost, so I was able to just connect them like that on either side. And since the muscle covers the bone, I actually used a magnet from a ski helmet so that you can sort of see what's underneath. So as you can see, here we have the bicep muscle, and on the back, on the posterior, we have the tricep muscle. And for the tendons, I also just use a resistance band, just a different color and it's stronger. So here we have the tendon here and connecting it at the back.